So I'm Alen Stellian, the Midlife Empowerment Coach, and today I am thrilled to introduce Adela Mizrachi. Adela is the founder of Podcast Brunch Club, or PBC, which is like a book club, but for podcasts. Every month, she sends out a thematic podcast playlist, and then local chapters meet up to discuss the episodes and trade podcast recommendations. Since she founded PBC in 2015, the community has grown to have more than 70, that's 70, chapters all over the globe from Chicago to Moscow. Individuals who participate in PBC are thoughtful, open-minded people who are interested in sharing and connecting with people in meaningful ways. And I would highly encourage you to join. It's free, and you'll find out more information at podcastbrunchclub.com. And I will certainly link that in the comments and description. So Adela, welcome. I just cannot wait to introduce our viewers to Podcast Brunch Club. You know, I'm a big fan, and I'm participated in person as well as virtually. So I'm just excited to talk to you about this. I would love to start out by asking you a little bit more about where this idea came from. Like what possessed you to start the Podcast Brunch Club?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This is a wonderful group and that you've created, and I am thrilled to be able to tell you about it. So about Podcast Brunch Club. So yeah, I started Podcast Brunch Club basically for the very simple reason that I wanted it, and I just thought like it's something I wanted for myself. And I've told people this story many times, but I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time. Like you said, it was 2015. And it wasn't when podcasts were super popular, but they were semi-popular. But I would find myself starting like every conversation with, so I heard on this podcast, and then fill in the blank. And I would get like one of two reactions. One would be, what's a podcast? And another would be like from my loved ones would be like, oh my God, she's talking, like the eye roll of, oh God, she's talking about podcasts again. But then I had a third reaction one time when friends came to visit and we were having dinner, and one of my friends responded with, I heard that podcast. Did you listen to this episode? Have you subscribed to this show? And we just like went down this rabbit hole of on our phones and subscribing and sharing podcast recommendations. And it just like clicked. I was like, oh, yes. Like listening to podcasts is so engaging and interesting, but it is such a solitary experience. And having that interaction was so great for me. And I was like, oh, this is exactly why book clubs exist, because you read a book and you're by yourself, and then you want to talk to people about it. So you gather after the fact and talk about it. I was like, oh, simple enough. Let's just do it. I'll get my friend and we'll get some friends and friends of friends together for brunch. Right? It's called Brunch Club. And let's talk about it. And so that's why it started.
And it started in Chicago. So I joined you quite a few times at these brunches. It was usually, I think, on a Sunday, and we tried different locations. And it drew a very diverse crowd too. I mean, I remember, there were men, there were women, different ages. So that was really interesting to me that the podcast seemed to resonate across a very diverse group of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been impressed by that too, or surprised, I guess. I think the older generations really enjoy it because it feels like radio, and maybe radio is very familiar to them. And once they kind of figure out the technological side of it, it's like very straightforward to them. And a lot of radio has been translated into podcast format. So it's a little bit more like on-demand radio. So for example, one of the most famous podcasts, This American Life, started out as a radio show that everybody just loves. And now they don't have to listen to it on the radio. They can listen whenever they want. So I think that's partially why it's like good for cross-generational audiences. And then like the young group, I think is also like really, they love the fact that they can do other things while they're consuming that media, right? Like it's one of the only and I think, this is across generations, but it's one of the only kind of media that you can consume while you're doing other things, while you're out and about, while you're grocery shopping, while you're out for a walk in the neighborhood, while you're doing dishes, you know what I mean? Like it just,
yeah.
I have a little TeePublic store for Podcast Brunch Club of like, like logos and whatever, but I actually created as a design that says podcasts make chores fun. Because it's totally true. Like I'm like, ooh, let's do dishes today because I really want to listen to this one episode or whatever. So
yeah, no, that's really neat. And I know there's also something around breaking bread, around getting together with other people and enjoying brunch was such a brilliant idea because in my case, except for having met you at a function and then been enamored with your idea and kept in touch with you and just gotten into it with you, I really didn't know anybody else. And it's really just a joy to get together with strangers who have this in common. They have this love of podcasts in common, and then you share a meal with them. It fosters conversation. It's very relaxed.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing that sort of Podcast Brunch Club, it feels different than a lot of other sort of live events because first of all, a lot of live events are like, you're going to go somewhere and it's very passive in that like you are consuming the thing, right? If somebody's on stage and either performing for you or talking at you or whatever, this is much more of like, you're all kind of coming somewhat from the same starting point because you've all sort of listened to the same set of podcasts. And then it's much more free form. It's much more, like you're going to be interacting with people. Which I think for some people could be really intimidating. And we've had some hurdles of just getting people to show up to a meeting because, it's weird. Like you're going to go to this strange place and you're going to, a restaurant you've never been to meet a bunch of strangers you've never seen before in real life. And, what if I walk up to the wrong table and being like, is this podcast? It can be really, really intimidating. I think, but once people get over that initial hurdle and they just get it, it's much easier. So, but yeah, I think also that, you came to the event that I had this past weekend and we had like a little Podcast Brunch Club mixer. So it was a little bit different. It was totally outside of the box of what I usually do. But I think what I wanted to hammer home with people that day, and, we sent people to breakout rooms so they could really engage in small groups and have conversations in small groups, is that, especially during the pandemic, I think we've all realized that fostering and nurturing our relationships is very important. But I think the thing that is missing in sort of that happiness gap is that interacting with strangers is also really important. It's just like having a pleasant interaction with somebody that you've never met and maybe will never see again has a huge mood boost. Even when you think you're not going to enjoy it, a lot of times you will. Like you'll go into it. And that's the weird thing about expectation. You expect that you're going to be like, oh, this is going to be weird, or, oh, this is going to be awkward, or, oh, and then if you actually just push yourself over that line, a lot of times you enjoy yourself. And also I will say that sometimes it just takes meeting one person to open up a whole world to you, right? Like I have lived in three places that I can think of, like that I've had to sort of like really hunker down and make new friends. And making new friends as an adult is difficult. And the ways that I ended up making the group of friends that I had in that city in the end was because I met one person who then introduced me to everybody else I know. And then eventually, sometimes that one person, I didn't carry on the relationship with them. It's sort of like that one faded into the background, but I became really close with people that they introduced me to. So it's just also like, you never know how you're going to meet people and where it's going to take you. So
I love what you're saying because I'm the same. I mean, I've used meetups as a way to get to know people. Like here in Sarasota, where I spend half the year now, before COVID happened, we were here for a few months and I was just looking at French speaking meetups and current events meetups and anything, and just walking up to tables full of strangers. And I'm an introvert, so it's not but I really believe exactly what you said. You never know who you're going to meet. And this is exactly what happened to me when I moved back from the suburbs into the city of Chicago, also where I spent the other half of the year. And I needed to make friends. I mean, the suburbs were only 40 minutes away where I was living, but you'd be surprised. I mean, that changes everything. You want to have people near you. It took really one girlfriend who then introduced me to two other women who then it's exactly what you said. So you never know who you're going to meet. And I think it's a wonderful reminder to everybody to just get out of your comfort zone a little bit, especially you're in a new place or you're looking for new friendships. and also just getting out of our comfort zone of the people who are exactly like us, whether it's
Yes.
our age, our culture, whatever it is, and meeting. I mean, it's been a pleasure. You have a lot of young people too who are in Podcast Brunch Club, and certainly younger than me. And it's just different perspectives, hearing, how other people think about things. It can be so eye-opening.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that I think people who participate in Podcast Brunch Club, it's sort of like a self-selecting group of people who are very thoughtful and open, because who else would want to get together with strangers for a brunch in a strange place they've never been to talk to people? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like just by virtue of people being there, they've already sort of like self-selected that they're open and thoughtful and interested in other people and interested in conversation. So, and I think the other nice thing about Podcast Brunch Club that it's hard to get, I mean, the meetups do a great job of this too, but is that, there's a jumping off point. Like, the jumping off point is podcasts listening, right? For you, maybe it's French speaking or whatever. There's this thing that's in common. It doesn't have to be a lot of times people get really intimidated by like transactional types of meetings where it's like networking or speed dating or whatever, where there's this like expected transaction between participants. Whereas if you take that transaction outside of a group setting, it just like lightens the load. You're not like expecting to walk away with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a new job or whatever. You're just going because you like the thing that you're going for. You like the jumping off point.
Yeah.
And then that could turn into a partner or a job or a group of friends or whatever. That's added bonus. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you're opening up your world to possibilities.
So I want to go back to you started the Podcast Brunch Club. It was an in-person, brunch event in Chicago. And then how did you, this was back in 2015. How did that grow into 70 chapters in 5 to 6 years? I mean, how does that work? How did that happen?
It was a shock. I mean, I was like shocked. So the way I thought it was going to happen was, and this is like, I just started it with friends and friends of friends. I didn't open it up to the public, like my group meetings. I just was like, like we just had a little email list with very specific people on the list, and let's go here and talk about these podcasts. I decided I had a friend who was in Geneva, Switzerland, and she was like, I love this idea. I want to do this too. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Like, you could be our first chapter, like outside of the Chicago chapter. And I'll just list it as like, this is, we have a chapter in Geneva. And like, in terms of just, this is what it is. And I thought maybe, and then I started Twitter and I started Facebook and I started the whole thing. And I started saying like, hey, if you want to start a chapter, let me know. And I really thought people were going to come to me and say, first, I didn't really think that many people would come to me and say anything, but I thought if people approached me, they would say, okay, I want to start this with my friends. And I'd be like, great, we'll just put your little like city on my map, and we'll send you the newsletter every month, and you can get your friends together on the side and whatever. But what happened almost immediately was that people were like, I really want to do this, but I actually don't have friends that listen to podcasts. Oh. And I want to open it up to the public. And I was shocked because that was totally not what I thought was going to happen. And it's not the way I thought I would operate my chapter. So I started just giving people the option. I said, you can either have it as a private thing with just your friends, if that's how you feel comfortable. We won't list it on the website, so people won't sign up, but you can just follow along and do it privately. Or if you want it to be public, I will help you, and I'll put it on the website, and we'll have a sign up form, and we'll figure out this whole thing. And it just sort of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So it's typically somebody who's been introduced to PBC or seen that's, my friend in Geneva now is doing it, and that's so interesting, but I'm in Paris, and so I want to, do that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about it is that like, it's the in-person thing. I think people at the time when I started it were like kind of craving more authentic in-person interactions. I think social media had hit its limit in terms of like, they call it social media, but it's not really social, right? It's kind of anti-social media. And like, you can hide behind your screen, you can hide behind your avatar, you can like be very sort of disconnected from the things that you actually put out there online and stuff. And people were starting, it was like, oh, this is not feeling great anymore. Like, it was kind of cool to meet all your high school friends again or reconnect with whatever. But at this point, you're like, there's something missing in my life. Like, I cannot live online only. And people were craving in person. And then this pandemic hit and that, shut everything down. But.
Yeah. So what talk to us about, I think you already had a national sort of, or virtual chapter when the pandemic hit. And then what did all these chapters do? Did they all go virtual and start Zooming the PBC in addition to the national chapter that's virtual, or the virtual chapter?
Yeah, so we were lucky that like about a year before the pandemic hit, a couple people came to me and said, "Hey, could we have a virtual chapter?" And again, I was like, I don't know if people are going to like that, but I was like, but if you want to try it, go for it. And I was so wrong. I'm always wrong about like what I'm expecting people are going to like or and that's why it's just kind of fun to like, just say yes, like just do, just say yes, just do it, like Nike, right? Just try it. Why not? And like a lot of times the thing that you think will happen, maybe a little bit of it will happen, but you won't be exactly right about how it'll work out. So yeah, they started it. We have like 500 people on the global virtual chapter list in terms of, who is interested in learning, but not, very, maybe about 20, 30 people who show up on a monthly basis, but we have a couple meetings and we had that already set up before the pandemic hit. So when the pandemic hit, and it was very weird because March of 2020, our theme for the month was happiness. So I think everybody was like, oh, happiness, like I want to know more about this because it's necessary. And so we just sort of in the beginning sort of had everybody join up with the virtual chapter. And we just said, like, obviously in person is on hiatus. Like if you want to meet up, go to the virtual chapter meetings and we'll, accommodate everybody that way. But then eventually, slowly, but little by little, our in-person chapters were like, I miss my in-person people. Like, I want to like see them. Let's, again, I thought, okay, well, everybody will just transition to the virtual and that's how we'll do it during the pandemic. But even my own Chicago chapter people reached out to me and was like, can we just have a Chicago meeting online? And I was like, okay. So we did that. And about half, I would say half just went completely on hiatus. The other half were like, yeah, let's just figure out this virtual thing and we'll do it that way. And because I have local volunteers in each city, I just kind of let the city, the chapter leader operate however they feel comfortable. I'm not going to force anything.
Right.
But for her
and the other thing to do, I know, talk to us about how you curate the themes for each month, because I think it's a chapter leader or somebody from a chapter who comes to you with an idea.
We've done it in a lot of different ways. In the very beginning, I actually curated the lists. And then people started coming to me and saying, can I curate? And I was like, absolutely. Like, it's a lot of work. So like, take it off my hands. And so they started doing it and I started scheduling people, and we had people like scheduled out for like 9 months in advance. And I think, and then there was like a lull in people wanting to do it, just because I think that people started realizing how difficult it is. It's not like picking a book for a book club, because a book is one book. You're picking a theme and then picking 4 or 5 episodes on a theme. And oftentimes, and you have to listen to the entire episode before you put it on the playlist. You have to think about like the fact that we're worldwide. So you don't want to have like only, you don't want to have anything about the US Supreme Court, right? Where it's just very focused on, or if you're going to have it on the US Supreme Court, there has to be an international angle for it too. And it's almost like curriculum design. You have to like actually how they fit together, how the podcasts fit together. You want to make sure that each one stands on its own, but then fit with so it became harder. So I started doing it again. And now what we've sort of transitioned to recently is more like a curation team, where I say, we're going to curate a playlist on, like, I think we're going to do beauty in another month. I'm going to put start adding your podcast episodes to the playlist, ones that are really good standalones. And then at some point, I'm going to close off the collection phase of the process and move to the selection phase. So we have 15 episodes on the long list. Now we have to cull it down to 5. And so the team then listens to all 15 and then ranks them. And I basically just choose the ones that were highest ranked.
Yeah, I'm always impressed with the curated list. Really offers a variety of perspectives too. It's really not meant to tell you what to think. It's meant to offer a broad, number of approaches or thoughts, and from different areas, different expertise areas, so that you can make up your own mind. And it's really not trying to tell you what to think, which I appreciate.
Thank you. Yes, we try very hard to offer different perspectives, just because that's what Podcast Brunch Club is about, right? We're all different. We're all coming at it from a very different perspective. And that's why it's really important to get more people involved in the curating process. Because I don't, like things that I like, even just in terms of like preferences and things like that, things that I like, people don't like. Even if I think one podcast episode is so good, somebody else might think it's the worst thing they've ever heard. And so I don't want, I just don't want to be the person who's sort of dictating what they should listen to every month. So I like this team effort thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And now this takes up a ton of your time. I mean, you have a day job. This is not your job. This is like, you have a day job. So how do you manage that? And what is your, I know now, I believe, there are people helping you, volunteers, but what is your vision for where you're going to take this? I mean, you've built this amazing platform, and I think there is also an opportunity to contribute toward your, toward the work, because I know from experience that all these things cost money to host a website, to make the changes, and it's time and money. So how do you manage all that?
Yeah, so I mean, I am lucky in that I have a lot of people who are helping me, like you said, volunteers. All of the chapters are run by a chapter leader. And then now I have this curation team that's helping me with the curating. I'm also working on streamlining a bunch of processes. Like, I think when you're thinking about something like this, you always have to think about sort of like strategy and process and like locking it down so that you're not just like reinventing the wheel every month. And, like you could just, so I'm working on sort of that sort of back end stuff so that it just reduces the amount of work that I have to do. That's something I'm focused on right now because I just can't spend this much time on it when it's not really like, offering me any sort of financial support or even just in terms of my time.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to like kind of take it to the next level, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, we did the Podcast Brunch Club Mixer, and that really didn't have a whole lot to do with podcasts. Like there was a little bit of podcast.
A little bit more about that, because I will say I participated in this, and it was yesterday, every day.
2 days ago. Yeah, Saturday.
Was it Saturday? Oh my God. And it was really interesting because it was really not meant for people to come together and talk about podcasts. It was, I think, was it coming off the Friendships Month where everybody was like, hey, I want to interact in a more social way, not just let's get together and talk about these podcasts. So it was interesting. Tell us more about that, and then about your vision moving forward.
Yeah, so you're right. We had a playlist on friendship in January this year, and everybody loved it. And it just got me thinking about how, Podcast Brunch Club is a great way to meet people, but maybe we could be better about it. Like maybe we could be more intentional rather than having everybody sit at a table, virtual or otherwise, right? And talk with a bigger group of people. 5 to 10 people is what we usually see at Podcast Brunch Club meetings. What if we really intentionally created space for people to interact and tell each other about themselves? Mm-hmm. Whether that's, after a meeting, when we go back to in person, so that people can actually become friends with people on a one-on-one basis, or whether it's virtual. I just wanted to kind of play with that idea. And so I conceptualized this Podcast Brunch Club Mixer. I had a friend also in Chicago who helped me a lot, Andrea. She was wonderful, and we sort of came up with this idea. And Podcast Brunch Club people are so open and thoughtful that I was like, you guys will, be forgiving about this. Let's just try it. Let's try this little experiment, this weird little friendship experiment. And I brought everybody together. We played a couple of clips from a podcast that we had listened to last year, just to set the stage and prime people for why it's important to do stuff like this. And then I just sent people out into breakout rooms with sort of conversation starter questions that were intentionally meant to get them talking about themselves in whatever way they wanted, right? There were 3 options that they could choose from in terms of the conversation starter question they could choose to answer. For example, one was what is the most challenging thing that you've done in your life? What is the coolest thing?
Right. Or give us a 3-minute summary of your life. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just to get them talking about themselves with people they've never met before, and hoping to spark those connections. And so we did that. And I think it was really successful. I got a lot of great feedback. I got a ton more interest than I thought I would get. So if I was going to sort of take it to the next level, what I think I'd like to focus on is the community and the connections, and like the sparking those connections. And so, almost exploding it, Podcast Brunch Club, like the idea of it outside of podcasts, maybe creating some sort of social club where maybe there are podcast clubs with underneath, but maybe there's documentary clubs where people get together and talk about a documentary they're watching, that everybody watched, or maybe there's whatever, or book club, right? But then also create more unstructured, unformatted, like more free form mixers like this, where people can actually just get together and engage, but with a format, not like this nebulous, like, let's just all get together at a bar and have a drink and that's it, right? I feel like people need a little bit of a structure in order to, especially introverts or people who aren't super outgoing.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It was so nice to, and I loved, as being in a smaller setting. I love breakouts on Zoom, so I'm a big fan. It was really nice to connect in a different way and to have the prompts, and also to be told, to given guidance as to who goes first and timekeeping and all that. So it was very well organized and really fun, and just interesting to meet people from, all over the world. I think the furthest away from me was a woman in China who was on this little Zoom. So very, very fun to meet other people in this setting. So thank you for setting that up. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about Podcast Brunch Club. I'd love for you to talk to us about, if somebody wants to join a club. I don't know what, after the pandemic, I'm assuming maybe things will go back to, if the chapter chooses to in person, but how can somebody learn more about Podcast Brunch Club, join a club, join the virtual, or even start their own club?
Yeah, absolutely. I should have mentioned that. Anybody's welcome to start a club. So podcastbrunchclub.com has all the information. If you scroll down on like the main webpage, you'll see a map, and that's where all of our chapters are. And then there's also a form that you can fill out if you want to start your own chapter. There's, you can navigate to the global virtual chapter. I would say another good web page on that site is podcastbrunchclub.com/how-it-works, how it works. That'll sort of give you a rundown of like step 1, join a chapter, and these are the options. And step 2, listen, here are the listening lists. And then if you want to get in touch with me, you can always email me. I'm at Adela, that's ADELA @podcastbrunchclub.com.
And I should also say, if you want to get a taste of Podcast Brunch Club, I mean, you don't have to be in a club, in a chapter, in order to go and listen to and see all of the back, listening lists. So you've got all that available on the website too, and you can see how it works. And it's like, oh, but get a taste for what these curated lists look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That would be, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today, Adela. It's just, I'm just so in awe of everything you've done in just a few short years with this idea, this germ of an idea that you had, and look where you took it. So it's pretty amazing. I will be putting the link to your podcastbrunchclub.com in the comments. I hope everybody will go check it out. I'm a big fan. And thank you for everybody who's joining us today or on replay. Special thanks to Adela again. And if you enjoy these videos, please watch for more coming weekly. Until then, be well, stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.